Hi, this is Ryan Gates, and instead of writing a paper, which didn't look like it was required, so I decided to kind of take a different route and do a screencast. I built a comic to show what a high leverage practice looks like for the four that I have, but all the practices are based on the definition of a high leverage practice, which is an action or task central to teaching. And if carried out skillfully, these practices increase the likelihood that teaching will be effective for students' learning. So the first one that I have is positioning students as competent. Now, the way I see it is this is individualizing content and making sure that all students uh, are you're teaching to all the students and not just the students in the middle skill level. And that's one of the things here. That's what I depicted here is that the student is looking at all these different students, and you have Joe, who has never passed science. You have Samantha, she's never received anything lower than A in science. And you have Frank, who is an average student, not great, but at anything, but understands most of the things. And positioning all these students as competent is what is required. So, not teaching to that middle bell curve is what you know is the high leverage practice in my eyes. And one way that you see this happen is by making grouping the stronger students with the less strong students, so that the strong student is teaching and the less strong student is also learning, and then between the two of them they can together create a learning community amongst themselves, which then continues on. This is something that is it is a high leverage practice because it's essential to to the success of a student. If the student doesn't feel competent, we've all met those students. I'm not good at math. I'm not good at science. And um, if they already think that, then they're not going to be successful. Um, but we've also heard the stories of a student learning or having a teacher and they say, oh, this teacher opened my eyes to how amazing science is because that teacher positioned that student as feeling competent to do the work. My next focus was orienting students to one another and to the discipline. And in this one, I depict that the teacher is asking the students to turn to their neighbors and guess um, what the relationship is between temperature and pressure. So the key to this is getting the students to talk to one another about the discipline, not just to talk to one another about what Frankie and Joe did, all over the weekend. And the reason for this is because, and the reason it's a high level skill is because you got to get the students thinking about the discipline. And you have to find ways to incorporate the discussion about the discipline into your teaching. And that is a difficult thing to do. And it's not something that comes naturally to some. Some teachers want to deliver all the content on their own without the students interacting. They just want to write on their whiteboard. Students write it down, memorize it, and away you go, because they're in control of what the students are learning and what the students understand. But it takes a lot of work to find the points where the students can interact with each other and teach each other. But the interactions are a key component of the learning environment because it helps the students, one, learn about interactions with each other, and it also helps them to later in life, in whatever vocation they choose, to understand how the interactions work. Working with other people, and how to interact with them and how to focus on a discipline between the two of them, between individuals, is a key component of any vocation. And my next uh, focal practice was developing and maintaining a productive environment. And what I always picture when I think about developing a productive environment is setting up classroom rules and procedures. And the first day you start with let's create some classroom rules and procedures. So the reason I think about this is you get the kids to buy in because they are the ones that set up the rules. They are the ones that thought, hey, this is going to make it so that this is a productive place for us. Obviously, you as the teacher have a little bit more power, veto power, and can add in the ones that you need to be added in. But this goes along with having the student feel comfortable in your classroom, and this is makes it so that if the students feel comfortable and they feel respected, they will be more likely to say something that they've been thinking about, raise their hand for a question, especially if everybody is not going to mock them for having the wrong answer. And it's okay to be wrong. And if you talk about that and having that productive classroom learning community, it's because all the students feel comfortable and safe in that classroom in terms of learning, and also in terms of just as an individual. Uh, and classroom management is a huge uh, piece of being a teacher, and not all the teachers have this skill come naturally to them. And this is why classroom management is taught in almost um, every teaching program. They talk about classroom management, and how it's a main component of teaching. There's classroom management and delivering the content. Those two, if you can manage those two, you'll be okay. But if you can't manage the classroom, then there's not gonna be a productive learning environment, and that's why it's a high leverage practice. Is because it will increase the likelihood that the teaching that you're delivering, the content you're delivering, will be effective, and that the students will learn. And my last one is representing student reasoning both visually and verbally. This one's a little harder for me. I do it as an online teacher, but it's a little more difficult sometimes because uh, you're not in front of a whiteboard to write down. But when you're in front of the class in a traditional setting, you do this quite often. If if you don't think about it, it doesn't necessarily come about. But the students, when you're presenting them with a new concept, they do not always know the correct vocabulary to use. Um, and giving them a chance to express themselves, to figure out what they're thinking, is a key to uh, a good learning environment from the previous. But in this case, for me, what it looks like is you have to ask a question, the student responds, and then you interpret that based and turn that into science speak or math speak. For instance, in this student, it says as pressure goes up, temperature will also go up. As pressure goes down, the temperature will go down. So when I say that, okay, so it sounds like you're talking about that it has a constant relationship. So I write on the board temperature and pressure, a constant relationship. I doubt that student would think about that as a constant relationship. So I've taken their words, which describe what a constant relationship is, and put it into one sentence. So I visually and verbally represented their reasoning, but in a way that we can then build upon as a science class and use, oh, that means that this is a constant relationship. And this is a very hard thing to learn because you don't always know what the student is talking about, and it's just one of those things you can gloss over, like a student is trying to explain something and you just not understanding it, so you kind of move on. But that student needs that reasoning represented visually in some way. So you're gonna have to take the time and okay, I think this is what you're talking about, and then if they say no, then you say yes. I mean, it's a very difficult skill sometimes to interpret exactly what is being said, and that is why it's a high leverage practice. Is all of these are difficult skills, and whenever you have a skill to try and learn, it always makes it difficult because not everybody picks up the skill right away. And that's why not all of us are professional basketball players or soccer players or whatever sport we had growing up. And that's why only a certain percentage of people do move on to high levels of sports because skills are difficult and to learn and to perfect, and some are predisposed to it. Uh, my initial thoughts on a high leverage practice when I looked at these ones was that it was an individualization of the teaching so that all the students learn. And that's kind of a difficult thing to do with students in a traditional setting because you have 150 students. Sometimes you're saying on in every, combined to all the classes. Um, but as I got into this class more, I realized that it's not that. It's maximizing the effectiveness of the teaching, um, and that each of these is used to make sure that the teaching is effective. And all of these combined will make a productive learning environment, and all the students will feel comfortable in that environment. In my classroom, the environment's way different than a traditional setting because I'm one-on-one with a student. And not all of these really apply. For instance, managing my time and pacing. Well, it's my I set the time. I don't have a set time where the class is at. So I don't have 45 minutes every Monday, Wednesday, Friday to to teach a class. But I do meet with a student for an hour. If I go over that hour, it's still okay because that's my own time. I set it up. But I do rely heavily on other things. Um, like teaching towards a clear learning goal or eliciting and responding to student contributions. That's a big thing for me because that's all I'm doing is I'm talking to them, I'm eliciting a response for them, and I'm building upon that response when I'm tutoring them on one-on-one basis. And using my body and voice is also a big key to it because if I'm not paying attention and if I'm on my iPhone texting other students, they're going to see that, and it's not going to be a productive learning environment for them. Teachers at my school take on a different role because we are one-on-one. We, as teachers, it's more of a guidance counselor role, a tutor, as well as a teacher when you're grading your highly qualified areas. The students in my class, my learning environment are also different than a traditional setting in that they are more of an individual working through the curriculum at their own pace and interacting with their virtual classmates. And when they interact, it's usually with the teacher on a one-on-one basis, and that they're getting help from the teachers directly. So they're going through the content presented, they get stuck, they contact the teacher helps them get unstuck, and then they keep going. Sometimes I never hear from students in my class because um, they are they don't get stuck. They get it. It just keeps moving on, and they don't have to worry about it. Um, and it's a difference. It's their own pace. It's their own idea. If they need help, they call me. If they don't, then their homeroom teacher will get a hold of me and we'll get it going. But if they don't, then it's easy. They just progress. Again, the reason why the high leverage practices are so difficult is because it's a skill. Anytime you try and learn a skill, it it's difficult to perfect that skill. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of focus, and some people don't think of it teaching as a skill based um, profession. They think about it as you learn the content, you give the content to the students, and then you question them on it. But it's more than that. It's a lot more than that. It's taking 30 kids and building a community where they all learn, and that's a difficult process. And thank you for your time. I hope this was meaningful to you as it was to me.